Hollywood Actor Podcast with Michael Moreno, Part 2.
That is extremely practical. I was kind of thinking of that idea the other day about moving forward constantly, but under your given circumstances. And I think that's just a rephrasing of what you're saying, is that no matter what's going on in your life, in terms of all the resources that we have or lack, we still have to find a way to move forward. They can't be excuses, or they can't be holding us back in those different aspects of our life. We got to just keep assessing what those levels of freedom are. And like you're saying, if there's some aspects that we can't control, then we move on to a different segment of our life, or figure out what that thing that we can't control is. And then we're able to better set it aside because we have identified it.
That's correct. Yeah.
That seems like very, very therapeutic. There's some real core of therapy there.
Yeah, because you're diving down and like really discovering what the root of a problem might be. And I do think that that's important, even though, I didn't phrase it that way in talking about it. I do think that that's absolutely crucial, is your, discovery and your curiosity about, what makes me feel good and what is causing me anxiety or discomfort, and drilling down to find out what it is. More often than not, it will be something rather simple. And simple in a way that you can either get it out of your life, simple in a way that you can choose, I don't choose to engage with this anymore, or simple in a way where you go, oh, okay, I understand that it is this very simple thing. It has nothing to do with me. It is in no way tied to my emotions. Therefore, it is not something I need to stress or worry about anymore. Thank you very much. And that can certainly come up, in the career side of things more often than not.
That's a function of having these conversations within our communities. We have to have those so that we can support each other and find those little things that we're then identifying for ourselves and for our friends. That type of group therapy is the product of having a healthy community. And so that is that final question that I do ask on the podcast, and was very much a launching point for me to create the Hollywood Actor Podcast. But I just wanted to get back a little bit to your journey coming into the professional world of acting. So after your MFA, you secured an agent and you moved to New York?
That's correct, yeah.
How did you find that transition from Los Angeles to New York? A lot of people bounce between. A lot of people find one is more of their home than the other, for many reasons. Did you find that New York was your home?
Well, a lot of people always ask me that when they find out, oh, I used to live in LA. I always said that if I wasn't going to live in Los Angeles, New York would probably be the other place that I would live. So I guess for a long time, I had sort of mentally prepared myself that this would be an option. And a lot of the things are very similar. The cost of living is almost exactly the same. You have a lot of the same industry, perhaps problems, challenges, opportunities here. People are very much the same in terms of what they really care about, and what drives them insane. But for me, it was not necessarily a hard transition. I mean, it has its own unique challenges, just like any sort of city does, where, Los Angeles, it might be traffic, and with New York City, it might be public transit. It's the same stress. It's the same challenge. It's the same, consistent, whatever it is, slog that you might be attached to, but it's just representing itself in a different way. Rent is still a problem, dealing with auditions on top of work and blah, blah, blah. It's all the same. It's all the same. So, there are some unique things again here that, maybe don't exist in LA in terms of having opportunities where, for one thing, in New York City, there's, just like in Los Angeles, you can get anything you want any time of day as long as you have the money. But here in New York City, it might get to you a little bit faster just because everything is so condensed. Whereas Los Angeles, you got to drive, I got to go from, Westlake to, all the way down to, who knows, Santa Monica or something. And, or, got to go from Venice to wherever. And like, now you got traffic in the mix, depending on the time of day. And so, stuff can take a really long time. In fact, in Los Angeles, it can be a lot more difficult to try and work in 1, 2, or 3 auditions a day and still go to a job. That can be very difficult depending on the traffic situation and what's going on. That can be done without too much difficulty in New York City.
Yeah, those hotspots for audition rooms and things, casting offices are a lot closer in New York City. I remember, mostly located around Midtown.
Yeah, exactly. So you can bump, from one place to the next, fairly easy, especially if it's all in Midtown. And boom, you've now checked off 3 things for your professional career that day, and you can still run off and go do a job or whatever. In fact, moving it more into the journey here in New York City, one of the things that I did as my day job here in New York City was working as a carpenter and electrician for live events and theater. So, the great thing was that it paid well. Immediately I was like here for just a couple of days, started making $20 an hour. Great. That's fantastic. And then since then I just kept in the biz and I kept making more money, and that was good. So I was getting a very good hourly rate for what I was doing. And sometimes, depending on where I was and how familiar I was with the people, I could take my lunch break and go do an audition and come back. And that's extremely powerful. That's extremely useful. There's a huge advantage to that. And that opportunity flat out would not have existed in Los Angeles, which is fine. But it's just like, that's a unique opportunity here in New York City. And so I took advantage of that quite a lot. And it worked to, like I said, it worked to my advantage. I was able to, audition for theaters. I had my equity card, so I could do, those shows. I was able to go in for casting directors. I had my agent who would send me on stuff, and I could still go out and work these projects and, make enough money to continue doing things and have control of my own time. That was the other thing, was that I would say yes to a project and have really quite a lot of control over my own time. They could be like, hey, we need you from this time to this time. Okay, I got something to do in the morning. I can be there at, 11:30 instead of 9:30. All right, fine. We'll take you 11:30 and then to this time. That's fine. Great.
That's great. That usually takes actors a long time, moving to these different markets and figuring out how to find those more lucrative jobs that have that flexibility.
Well, the good thing was that I recommend this to anybody, I took, the shop class in college seriously. Everybody has to do those, backstage projects, usually if you're in a BFA program. And I learned as much as I could about those things. And I even worked in those shops because I could work like student hours or whatever. So I would work in those shops, and those skills, I'm telling you, Jamie, those skills like immediately started making me money, and more money than my friends were making. And again, it wasn't like I had chosen a 9 to 5. I had control over my schedule. Someone might be like, hey, I need you for a day, or I need you for, this weekend. Okay, fine. And then boom, now I've made, enough money to cover me for, the week, and I can pick up another job, or I can do, auditions or whatever might come my way.
That is ideal.
Yeah, it was ideal. And it wasn't just carpentry, it was electrics too. So it's like, hey, do you need me to hang lights? Boom, I can do that. Hey, do you need me to build a set? Boom, I can do that. And that led to live events and other things, which were certainly outside of the world of theater or film, but it's, New York City Fashion Week is a very big thing here. There's also a lot of events happening all the time in New York City. So it ended up being quite a lot of work and a very lucrative part of my life here.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to take you far afield either, where it would in LA. There's so many expo centers that are strewn far and wide across the county, and
right.
You can't just pop back in for an audition where you could if you were working those types of jobs in such a confined space as Manhattan.
Right, that's correct.
Were you picking up where you left off, doing the improv and comedy circuit once you moved to New York? Were you participating with Groundlings and working stand-up?
I was not. I did not. Coming out of the MFA program, and even in college, really, stand-up was less part of my life. And so, my agent even talked to me. He was like, "Do you want to do this again?" And blah blah blah. Because obviously, there's sort of this route of, you work the clubs, you do the comedy, you maybe get on SNL, and not to mention these others. Now, of course, there's plenty of other options to be visible as a comic and a comedian than there were when I started. But at the time, I was like, that's not really what I would like to get back into pursuing. I want to focus on the acting specifically. So that's what we did. And it was mostly just, what's interesting is that now I have the show, the ActorCEO podcast, and focusing on your career like a business is basically the underlying fundamentals of the show. And I stress it so much because I didn't do much of that when I started. I just didn't. And, again, like I said, there was this period of, once you get into the hustle, and the hustle includes, you trying to make your rent and fill your fridge and have your creative career. Because it's all part of that, whether you live in Albuquerque or Los Angeles or, Atlanta or New York City, or the UK, wherever your listeners might be. That is true of all of those places, and it's true of the actor's life. It's true of, certainly most creative people's lives. So when you get into this pattern of sort of filling up your schedule and having this, this back and forth with yourself of constantly jumping from one thing to another, that it's hard to have some perspective. It's hard to get that 30,000-foot view and be like, oh, wait, I can have some patience when it comes to this. Oh, wait, I can have a long-term plan. Oh, wait, I can set some goals for myself and don't have to, expect that my agent is going to solve everything for me, or if I'm not getting the auditions that I want from them, that I'm sort of beholden to whether or not they can serve it up for me. No, I can actually go get that on my own. No, I can build relationships on my own. And so I certainly didn't realize that my first few years here in New York City. So I just did the hustle just like everybody else, and was a struggle-saurus just like everybody else. But, and that's what's led me to not only the show and have these conversations with people, because that's what I sought out. I started seeking out these conversations with people, with professionals who were like 5, 10, 15 steps ahead of me. And I could be like, so what's working with you? Basically all the way back to in grad school, in the bar, having those conversations. Hey, what's working with you? I've been doing this, what's the next step with this? And again, most of the perspective would come back to, hey, you're in control. These people work for you. This is your business. It's your career. You decide what you want, and you have, you got to treat it like a business. And once you start looking at it that way, it's about building relationships. It's about having that long-term perspective. It's about setting goals and working towards them, and having patience and being in it for the long game. And and even recently, with the show, I've created a what's called like a 5-day, 5-month planner. And I sort of have this challenge in a group that I have called the Acting Business Mastery Group. And that challenge is based entirely around essentially developing like a business plan for yourself. And so in 5 days, you can plan out what you want to achieve in the next 5 months of your career. So rather than, sometimes it can be really tough with the whole struggle situation of job to audition, back to job, and then sleep, and then eat, and then job and audition, and blah, blah, or it's a show, and then it's sleep, and then it's wake up, and then maybe you have to go to a job before you go to the show. It can be hard to have any sort of long-term perspective. So I try to break it down very easy for actors and say, listen, take 5 days and you will plan out the next 5 months. And that will at least give you some perspective and some idea of where you're trying to get to, what your goals are. So every little step that you make along the way can be met with some understanding of like, this is moving me towards a purpose. And then you don't get stuck up in these ideas of like, oh, I got to go meet my friends for brunch or blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you don't have, your extra $100 at the end of the month because you've been running around doing these things. You can actually go, oh, wait, if I save that $100, I'm going to be able to take this acting class with this great on-camera person or commercial person or whatever. And that's really going to help me towards my, 4-month goal here of actually, getting a commercial agent or whatever it might be, and you can really measure each achievement that you're doing day in and day out and fit it into this long-term plan that you have. And it really does help break everything down and simplify it, I think, so that you, you can just keep yourself, as you said early on, taking those small steps towards eventual progress. And it's just got to happen every day. But the struggle can sometimes throw you off track. And I certainly sympathize and empathize with that. And so that's what led me to talking to these professionals.
Well, in terms of the idea of measurement, I've just been coming to the realization that I need to measure what I'm doing, what I'm putting out into the world, and not truly quantifying what's returning to me. How, it's that cause and effect. You can cause things to happen, but whether they do or not is out of our control. So it's not necessarily a failure that something doesn't achieve. I mean, there's so many different examples for this, that you're putting in a certain amount of time or energy, you're using your resources, and then you're measuring to see if those resources have returned to you, or if you've been building up a business, or if a certain amount of auditions have been measured by, in their terms of success, by callbacks or booking work. You just go crazy if you try to measure and equate those two ideals of the cause and the effect, the amount of work you're putting into the amount of success that's being returned to you. But I love the idea that you can break those things down before they go out into the world. And you can say, this is what I'm doing today. This is what I'm doing this week. This money is earmarked for this, that, and the other. But then whether that money returns to you or whether those opportunities return to you, you just have to let go. And that's easier said than done, but I'm finding that a lot more as I'm maturing within the industry.
But it's easier to let go when you know why you're doing it, I think. So, let's say you have this goal. And one of the first people I interviewed, his name is Eric Satterberg. He's a great actor, hilarious dude. We went to college together. He was a year, I think, ahead of me at Chapman. And, he came out and he set himself, the conversation we have in episode, I don't know, 2 or 3 or whatever it is about him setting these goals for himself in terms of commercial work. At first, he came out and he was like, I wanted to be an actor and, I was going to do, whatever came my way. And then he decided to focus on commercials. And once he did, he really started taking the courses, taking the classes, whatever he needed, meeting the people, and really set himself up with these goals, specifically like on a whiteboard. In the next, 12 months, I'm going to be doing these things. And that's all going to be pushing me towards being a better commercial actor, being someone who can get better at landing these auditions, then being someone who can get better at having a good showing in the room, a good audition in the room, then being someone who can get the callbacks, then being someone who could book. You see what I'm saying? So, and by laying it out that way, he just kept checking those boxes. And in 1 year, he was able to book 12 commercials within that year, all part of that process. And it was really mind-blowing. And he's done obviously much more than that now. But it was that sort of perspective, that sort of breakdown that I just thought was very significant and incredibly useful for actors. Because again, each of those little steps and each little piece of success, you can be like, okay, great, this is me taking a step forward. And anytime there's a little mistake, or anytime there's a little maybe you didn't book something, or maybe I don't know, whatever it might be, something that ends up being not exactly what you expected, you can look at it in perspective and see, this may feel significant right now that I didn't achieve this, but when I look at it in my grand plan, it is but a bump in the road.
Thanks for listening to the Hollywood Actor Podcast. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening.